In a day and age where there are stories about how it would really be if we had superheroes living among us, there is one that still stands taller than the rest. Watchmen 2009 is an anomaly. A film that is so stylized, so faithful to its source material, with amazing performances and direction, but is also so polarizing to its viewers, leaving half its audience appalled at what they're being forced to watch on screen. The film being written by David Hare and Alex C., and directed by the influential or infamous, depending on how you view him, Snyder. The film is an adaptation of the beautifully constructed, critically acclaimed Watchmen, published through 1986 and 1987, and created by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. The main characters for in Watchmen are based off Charlton comic characters, which at the time were already bought by DC Comics, and Alan Moore wanted to get the rights to these characters, but ultimately wasn't allowed. Moore thought a story that had original heroes and characters would ruin the effect of having the readers see these characters as heroes they knew, such as Superman and Batman, and seeing how their lives would actually turn out from the trauma their lives have endured. Moore, however, decided this was okay, as long as we have these characters with familiar traits that we associate with these heroes. Though the Watchmen characters are based off Charlton comic characters, with designs and names following close to their counterparts, the Watchmen characters also share traits with more known heroes, like heroes from the Justice League and DC. When the theatrical release hit most theaters on March 6, 2009, it came to very mixed reviews from fans of the book, regular audience members, and critics alike. Though some critics praised the film for its immersive dark atmosphere and its stylized grim, some panned it for being visual fodder with lazy storytelling. The audience reactions from non-critics was even more polarizing. You had fans of the graphic novel either praising its faithfulness to the book with a few tweaks needed for a film adaptation, or had them questioning why they would change any aspects of the novel at all. Families went to the theater expecting a fun, action-filled superhero film, and ended up with a violent character drama instead. Sure, we had darker toned stories with The Dark Knight and Batman Begins, but those two films were still outnumbered by the family-oriented superhero film at the time. Unknowing parents may have thought they were getting something like Spider-Man 3, but the kids had to suffer through a film with little action, adult themes like attempt rape, which they don't understand, and the worst part for a kid, the long stretches of just characters talking.
In my opinion, the existence of life is a highly overrated phenomenon. Just look around you.
In 2009, my dad was an audience member who thought the movie changed what it needed, and it was an amazing final product, while my twin and I were a couple months away from being 9 years old, and we apparently hated it due to being boring. Kids were not a fan of this film, and that's understandable. Watchmen isn't meant for kids. Getting out how the theatrical release did, I won't be talking about that one. I'll be discussing the ultimate cut of Watchmen, that is a little over 3.5 hours long. This version of the film not only includes all the deleted scenes that the director's cut has, but also includes the comic within a comic portion of the film narrated by Gerard Butler. I'm going to look at the changes that the movie did to the book and see how it affected the story of the film. I'm going to come out and say that the movie is a very faithful adaptation of the graphic novel, copying exact scenes from the pages of the book, the tone, and the way it looks. So I'm not going to be talking about masterfully recreated scenes like this one. I also believe that the casting for this film was done marvelously, unlike Macabre's storytelling thought. He also has a really good critique of the TV show and has great reviews of the book and film as well.
Wow, it's very nice.
And I thought that all the actors gave fantastic performances to match the amazing direction given to them. There was a reason why Snyder was trusted by DC to make darker versions of their stories for film. Snyder put in the work and the effort and a specific style that made this film so flashy and visually entertaining. With that said, let's discuss the things that I think Snyder and the film did better.
Oh, the times they are a-changing.
Right at the opening of the film, I'm enthralled. I know how it's going to go down. Now it's time to see it happen on film, and it doesn't disappoint. Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Edward Blake, also known as the comedian, based off the Peacemaker from Charlton Comics, is perfectly displayed here by Jeffrey Morgan and Snyder himself. Yes, we see how competent a fighter he is, while also giving us the lonely old man at the same time. The book opens with the detectives investigating this place, as a flashback of the comedian's murder plays out, but the film has the murder happen in real time. I enjoyed this more, getting lines like,
"It's a joke. It's all a joke. Forgive me."
The music and its false juxtaposition to the brutal action happening on screen. There's no way the opening doesn't intrigue its viewer.
Oh, the times they are a-changing.
Another thing thing the film gets right, and I'm not saying it does better, just made the right call, was to put the history of the Minutemen and the new dawn of heroes being portrayed through the opening credits after the comedian's death. In the graphic novel, Alan Moore soon realized in his writing drafts and outlines that he only had enough story material for 6 issues, when him and Gibson's were signed to make 12. Moore worked around this by adding in issues with backstories for the characters and going into further plot details, while adding pages to the end of every issue, not in comic format, and having detailed information on our current characters and the heroes from the last generation. These credit scenes are able to work out the history of the Minutemen and start the next stage of heroes, and the downfall of the already broken team with Snyder's amazing visuals accompanying it, while also telling the avid fans and readers of the graphic novel they didn't skip or ignore the amazing world building and lore that Moore had written into the story.
Oh, the times they are changing.
There's an important part of the story when Hollis Mason, who is publicly known to be the original Night Owl and part of the Minutemen, and is a play on the original Blue Beetle, is murdered. In the graphic novel, Hollis Mason is attacked at his home by a street gang known as the Knot Tops, after Rorschach is broken out of prison by the second Night Owl and second Silk Spectre. The Knot Tops, with their mob mentality, assume it's Hollis who broke Rorschach out of prison, and assume that he's still the current Night Owl.
Sprung him. Those bastards, they do whatever they like. Yeah, some owl character did it. Night Owl? My dad knows him. Lives over some garage near here. We ought to go kick his ass.
In the book, when Hollis Mason is being beaten to death, it keeps cutting to a still of when he was fighting his enemies all at once while surrounded, showing the parallel to the weak old man he is now, and the former fighter he used to be. It's an amazing finish when Hollis is on the floor, with his head about to be smashed in, and the film differs from the book by having the flashback be one of Hollis pinned by Moloch the Magician, who has been the main villain that has been talked about throughout both versions of the story, with characters constantly commenting about he's the most dangerous villain they had, and he's fought both generations of heroes.
You people, you hear Moloch's back in town, get your panties all in a bunch. You think catching him matters?
Justice matters.
This change is more sympathetic for the viewer too, seeing a character fighting to live and ultimately failing to come out alive, instead of almost an instant strike to the head and Mason is gone. On the note of Hollis Mason's death, Dan Dreberg, the second Night Owl, who had a reverence for Hollis and was his friend, even makes sure they had a beer and shoot the shit once every week, has an understandable reaction to find out Hollis is dead, and it's adapted perfectly from book to screen.
Or not, doesn't
Who murdered Hollis Mason? You tell your friends they're dead?
So far in the story, since Hollis' death happens closer to the end, we've seen Rorschach and Dan meet back up for the first time in a while, and understand their relationship completely.
There's a maintenance hatch that'll let you out 2 blocks north.
Yeah, I remember. Came here often. When we were partners.
Those were great times, huh, Rorschach? What happened?
You quit.
They're broken friends, split up from the No Vigilante Act passed in 1977, and the stigma toward costume individuals that followed it. Rorschach never cared about public perception, and continued to be a vigilante, while Dan retired with every other hero that wasn't a government official. We can see Rorschach misses Dan, and Dan misses the hero life and how his life used to be, including when he got to spend time with Rorschach.
Rorschach's journal. First visit of evening fruitless. Feel slightly depressed.
As the book progresses, we see other moments like this.
Daniel, you are a good friend. I know this can be difficult with me sometimes.
After that one, when Dan discovers Hollis has been murdered, in the novel, this happens.
Unidentified gang murders Mason. Supports mass killer theory. Look, I don't care. Merely suggesting that by finding mass killer can have revenge for Mason's death. Meant to comfort you. Comfort me? Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Rorschach. Really. You're welcome.
Rorschach tried to offer something that would help his friend in a time Dan clearly needs him. This is not something that we would have seen Rorschach done if it wasn't due to Dan constantly liking Rorschach and reassuring him that they're friends. I think it's a big character moment for Rorschach, and the film made a poor choice not keeping it for movie viewers to see.
Oh, the times they are changing.
The last thing I think the movie did better than the book was the death of Rorschach, played by Jackie Earle Haley. The death of Rorschach is one of the most important scenes in the book and the movie as well. It's the death of a character we've been following since the start of the story, the only character who is willing to reveal what actually happened and Vight's true plan, but also the character who lost faith with humanity. While John lost touch with his humanity, slowly becoming more god than man, Rorschach gave up his humanity once he saw the human race was something he couldn't be a part of, even in a physical sense.
I'll tell you about Rorschach. Once a man has seen society's black underbelly, he can never turn his back on it. Never pretend, like you do, that it doesn't exist, no matter who orders him to look the other way.
Forcing himself to lose his human identity as Walter Kovac to the harsh and justice-driven identity as Rorschach, going as far as claiming his mask be his true face.
Christ, he stinks! Get that mask off! No! My face! Give me back my face!
This is all important because in the end of the book and film, when Rorschach is trying to leave Vight's Antarctic base to tell the world what happened, Dr. Manhattan stops him. This is the only time we see Rorschach completely take off his mask willingly, to show his human face, to let John know that he is doing this for humanity, for people he thinks are worth trash.
Out of my way. People have to be told.
You know I can't let you do that.
Suddenly you discover humanity. Convenient.
This is Rorschach going against what he said in the start of the story.
All the vermin will drown. The accumulated filth of all their sex and murder will foam up around their waists. And all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, "Save us." And I'll whisper, "No."
This character death is truly an amazing end to the story and Rorschach, and it sticks with every viewer of the story. And how does the film do it better? Well, in the book, Rorschach leaves by himself, and Dr. Manhattan appears to stop him. Rorschach exchanges his last words, mocking John's protection of Vight's secret, and John ultimately ends arguably the best character in the story.
What are you waiting for? Do it, Rorschach. Do it!
In the film, Rorschach actually comments on John, and how his lack of humanity is what caused Vight to start his whole plan in the first place.
If you'd cared from the start, none of this would have happened.
Before mocking his protection of Veidt.
Of course you must protect Vight's new utopia. What's one more body amongst foundations?
John kills Rorschach, forcing a powerless night owl to watch his best friend die.
Do it! No!
Snyder also chose for Rorschach's blood being the style of an ink blot, which I'm surprised Dave Gibbons didn't come up with first. In every work of art, when it comes to adapting another piece, especially another medium like a novel or show to film, you'll be forced to adapt and cut things that don't seem necessary in the short and concise amount of time you have. The real question is what you changed, it's why you changed it, and is it justifiable? Those changes from graphic novel to film that I just mentioned were not only better than the source material, but also had meaning on why they were there. These changes I'm about to list off are now changes that I don't think needed to be made for the film, because they only chip away at the diamond the graphic novel is, instead of shining and polishing it like the former changes did.
Oh, the times they are changing.
A small change to start on is Rorschach in the start of the film, when he is trying to warn the others about the comedian's death and his theory of a mass killer hunting former heroes.
Maybe someone's picking off costumed heroes.
You don't think that's a little paranoid?
That what they say about me now? Paranoid.
Rorschach first visits his old partner, Dan Drieberg, who is the second Night Owl, to tell him his theory, and the scene is identical to the original in the book.
Is this bean juice?
Human bean juice. Badge belonged to the comedian. Blood too. He's dead.
What is it? This little stain, is that bean juice or... That's right. Human bean juice. Badge belonged to the comedian. Blood, too. He's dead.
But for the second warning, instead of Rorschach going to Veidt Enterprise in the middle of the night and visiting Adrian, played by Matthew Goode, discreetly, it's Dan who goes instead, during the day and in the middle of a press meeting with Nova Express. This is played out like this so we can hear all of Veidt's accomplishments as he tells the press, and hear about his work with Dr. Manhattan, and how the two plan to harness Dr. Manhattan's energy to create a clean, renewable energy source and eliminate fossil fuels. In the film's words,
that our Cold War with the Russians isn't ideological, it's based upon fear. Fear of not having enough. But if we make resources infinite, we make war obsolete.
the scene is changed in order to give the audience more of the same information we already knew, or adding in details that the book didn't have, convoluting the scene and overall ending. This is happening during a press meeting, show how popular Veidt is to the public compared to all the other heroes who were shunned and outlawed, which would have had the same result by Rorschach having to sneak into a big fancy expensive looking building on the top floor and talking to Adrian as posters and toys of him are laying clearly around what seems to be his office. The film also loses Rorschach's mocking Adrian's title, the world's smartest man, that Adrian's PR coined for him, for 2 extra minutes of convoluted plot details. First-time film audiences don't learn this very important detail about Adrian till later on in the film, when this is something that should be clearly an early story and character details. Not only that, but having lines like
The Cold War with the Russians isn't ideological. It's based upon fear of not having enough.
When I've never heard any documentary or teacher talk about the Cold War being about finite resources, just to justify the plot point of using Dr. Manhattan's energy as a renewable fuel source in the film to alter the ending of the book is stupid. Veidt talks poorly about the comedian and Rorschach to Dan, and is acting really, really strange around someone who's supposed to be an old friend.
Rorschach's a sociopath, Dan. When so was the comedian. He was practically a Nazi. You know that better than anyone.
Even Rorschach and Dan had an easier time talking to each other, and it wasn't as friendly as this conversation. Veidt didn't make much eye contact with Rorschach at this point either, but Rorschach was wearing his face, and let's just say that they're not too close. But Veidt should be talking to Dan and looking him in the eye. Veidt is charming, a good-talking philanthropist, yet he is acting very ominous. Veidt's last piece of information that he gives, and I feel like is only there for a transition from Veidt's office to the Rockefeller Research Military Center, but the actual line itself is questionable.
The Soviets have 51,000 warheads stockpiled. Even if John stops 99% of the 1% to get through, he'll still kill every living thing on Earth. Even Dr. Manhattan can't be everywhere at once.
I can't prove that Dr. Manhattan can do this, but he definitely has the potential, and Veidt will prove later on in the story to underestimate Dr. Manhattan's abilities.
The world's smartest man poses no more threat to me than does its smartest termite.
But the film also changes the scene with Dr. Manhattan, played by Billy Crudup, and Lord Jupiter, played by Malin Ackerman, being warned, but at least this time Rorschach is the one warning them. This scene in the film also really bothers me on a technical level, missing important plot details, but much more on a character level than the last change did. Rorschach in the graphic novel has a complete change of attitude towards Dr. Manhattan and Laurie than he did when he was passively aggressive and confrontational with Veidt.
The man was practically a Nazi. He stood up for his country, Veidt. He never let anybody retire him. Never cashed in on his reputation. Never set up a company selling posters and diet books and toy soldiers based on himself. Never became a prostitute. If that makes him a Nazi, you might as well call me a Nazi too.
What are you doing here, Rorschach? This is a government base, and I hear you're wanted by the police.
Good evening, Miss Jupiter.
That's you, Spetchik. Jupiter was just a name my mother assumed because she didn't want anyone to know she was Polish.
Apologies. Came to warn you both and bring bad news.
Rorschach wants to warn them and get answers, and he's trying his best to cooperate. The comedian's attempt rape on the first inspector, who was also Laurie's mom, is brought up and debated between Rorschach and Laurie, causing Laurie to become upset.
Blake was a bastard. He was a monster. You know he tried to rape my mother? Back when they were both Minutemen?
So you support the allegations made in Hollis Mason's book concerning Blake?
What Mason said in Under the Hood is what happened. Why do you think Blake never sued Mason?
This is what takes John's attention off his projects. He did not care about the comedian being dead or what Rorschach had to say, but he does only care, or at least has a link with humanity, to Laurie. So when she's upset, so is John.
I'm not here to speculate on the moral lapses of men who died in their country's service. I came to warn.
Rape is a moral lapse. John, get this creep out of here.
You seem to be upsetting Laurie. I think you ought to go.
The film, however, has Dr. Manhattan just shooting the shit with Rorschach, having him talk the entire scene instead of Laurie, and you don't even get a reaction out of her when Dr. Manhattan says the comedian's been murdered.
The comedian is dead. Rorschach wants me to look into my future. See if the killer's ever publicly identified.
And since there's no reaction from Laurie, we don't see how she is John's connection to humanity early on in the story, and John actually kicks Rorschach out because he's bored, wants to go back to work. That's just character riveting. That's really rich and in-depth there.
I must return to my work.
Wait a minute. What if that's why someone wants us out of the way? so we can't do anything to stop it.
Goodbye, Rorschach.
Took a lot of effort to get in here to see you. I'm not leaving until I've had my say.
This next minor difference, which was blurred all throughout Adrian's last scene while he was talking to the press and Dan was waiting to warn him, really bugs me a whole lot. And some people might find this nitpicking, but it's how in the film, the costume heroes after the Minutemen are universally called the Watchmen, like their own team title.
Do you think the other Watchmen resent me for prostituting their struggle? It's a fair question. I would hope the other Watchmen understand that.
Mr. Veidt, to date, you're one of only 2 Watchmen ever to reveal their true identity to the world, the first being Hollis Mason.
This might make sense if at any point in the graphic novel they were even remotely close to being called that. The title Watchmen is derived from the Latin phrase translated to, who will guard the guards themselves, or commonly changed to, who watches the watchers, and who will watch the watchmen. This just means, who holds those above us accountable and responsible for what they do.
Till then, it's like you always say, we're society's only protection.
From what?
Are you kidding me? From themselves.
In the graphic novel, the phrase who watches the watchmen is almost graffitied to a brick wall during a protest, but before the phrase could even be finished being spelled, the comedian shoots a gas grenade at the kid holding it.
I've seen that written up all over. They don't like us, and they don't trust us.
Why is there a protest going on? Because the citizens of the United States, especially New York, want mass heroes gone, and who is here to turn a peaceful protest violent? A laughing comedian, and a night owl horrid by the fear they are causing. In the film, the phrase literally means, who watches a superhero team? Another problem with this is, why do they even have a team name? Since in the book and film, they both show that the heroes had a group meeting together and it turned out to be a disaster, with nothing being accomplished. Even if you were to have a team name, why not the New Minutemen or the Crime Busters, like the book had as a potential team names?
Why? The Crime Busters? Well, as you know, this country hasn't had an organization of masked adventurers since the Minutemen disbanded in '49.
I understand that the title of the book is called Watchmen, but that's just because it's a subtle meaning, not a literal name for a non-existent team. Let's get down to the 2 big differences, which was basically the film changing 2 whole characters and their specific plot points. The first one not only changes the film, but takes away so much of the mystery of the story and the ability to learn more interesting information about Laurie to keep people interested in her. I don't think the film knew exactly what to do with Laurie, since I think Snyder probably cared about her character the least. Laurie is a girl who is needed for a human connection with someone. Her father left her and her mother when she was young, and her mother, the original Silk Spectre, just raised Laurie to be the next one. This made Laurie resent her mother, but Laurie also resented the person she became as well. Laurie met Dr. Manhattan when she was 16, and the first night they kissed, with John cheating on his then long-time but aging girlfriend Janie Slater, and leaving her for Laurie. This made Laurie happy then, but John was already well into the process of losing his humanity when he met her, and at the start of the story, years and years after they've met, it seems John has a thin and weak bond with humanity, but only through Laurie.
You're my only remaining link to the world.
I don't want that responsibility anymore.
At this point, Laurie's at a breaking point with John, hating herself for staying with John only in responsibility to not upset America's ultimate weapon against the Russians. When John and Laurie are having sex, let's just say that John doesn't have his undivided attention during it like anyone would want.
Are you working in here while we're in bed together?
She just wants one person to care for her, to actually feel for her, physically and emotionally, not just with more than 2 hands. Laurie's in need to become her own confident version of herself, while also in need of a loving human connection that she has been neglected from for years. This film is able to adapt most of Laurie and Dr. Manhattan's scenes quite well, but really dropped the ball on her relationship with her mother, and her relationship with the comedian. In the early years of the Minutemen, the comedian and the original Silk Spectre had a rocky relationship from a pretty horrendous deed that the comedian tried committing. This is public knowledge due to the original Night Owl's published book that has him discussing the attempt raped in it.
And the comedian. No, don't get me started on him.
This itself is kept the same from the book to the film adaptation. It's the fact that Snyder thinks the audience is a bunch of dumb babies, so he spoon-feeds all the details of the comedian being Laurie's real biological father. Like I said, the comedian and the Silk Spectre had a rocky relationship, and that meant there was some good too. And the 2 both had consensual sex years after the original attempt to rape, and the 2 conceived Laurie, who was raised by another man. These are all details of the book, but these are given to us near the end of the novel, after we've had scenes dropping hints. This was the first hint in the movie. That isn't even a clue. That is the main detail in the book that puts the nail in the coffin that there's the truth that the comedian is her father, and it's the first hint of the film.
I was a hero, goddammit!
It's not my fault you got old. What do you have to complain about him putting food on the table for you and your child? Why don't you call your friend Eddie? Maybe he can give you a better life.
It was a mistake. One time.
He tries to rape you.
The worst part is, the film plays out the rest, and still expects it to be a shock to the audience by the payoff point when it's officially revealed near the end when she's on Mars.
The comedian was your father.
And you could be saying, well, film for thought. It's only obvious to you because you've seen the movie and you've read the book already. But my girlfriend, who was a first-time viewer and never read the novel, figured out it right when she saw that scene too. The worst part is, I can't even justify why Snyder would do this. This hint happens right after Dr. Manhattan kicks out Rorschach, so since the audience at this point is ignorant and hasn't been explicitly shown that the comedian had an attempt rape on Silk Spectre, that the film audience wasn't going to be able to piece together such an obvious clue.
What do you have to complain about him putting food on the table for you and your child? Why don't you call your friend Eddie? Maybe he can give you a better life.
It was a mistake. One time.
He tries to rape you.
It really baffles me since it causes nothing but extreme harm to the plot twist in the story itself, making us feel like Laurie's more of an idiot for not figuring out it sooner like the rest of us did.
Oh, the times they are changing.
The last big change in the movie that did nothing but change an entire character in the ending of the story was the changes made to Adrian Veidt and his plan. In both stories, Adrian is the mastermind behind the murder of the comedian, is able to end the Cold War by killing millions, and all the other events crushed throughout the story. Adrian isn't a bad guy though, and this might be hard to believe for a person who's only seen the film. In the book, Adrian is a self-made, charming, ambitious, and good-intentioned man. When his parents died when he was only a teenager, he rejected their fortune and gave it all away, wanting to make something for himself. Adrian's character is inspired by Thunderbolt, a charlatan character who was an orphan boy raised in the Himalayas. Thunderbolt returned to America to use his new gifts to fight crime. Adrian is close to the same, orphaned at a young age and left the States to follow the same path Alexander the Great had gone during his quest to conquer and unite the lands. After this, Adrian returned to America and his crime fighting started soon after. I'm not using the before Watchmen Osmondea plot point, because obviously it's not a review on that, and also, I don't trust a prequel not drawn and written by the original creators. The backstory is kept the same for both stories, but for some reason, every single scene in the film with Adrian has changed from how it was in the book. When Dan warns Adrian it's not Rorschach, only heard in the scene, the Crime Busters media isn't co-founded by both Ozymandias and Metropolis Man, and instead of there being an assassination attempt on Veidt in his life, it's Veidt and all of his business partners, plus his secretary. Veidt doesn't discuss his motives and backstory, and instead of Veidt poisoning 3 of his top scientists, he poisons 8. The fight scene between Adrian versus Rorschach and Night Owl, Veidt has a conversation with Dan after Rorschach dies, not Dr. Manhattan, and the conversation is completely different. Snyder didn't feel like Adrian Veidt, one of the most important characters of the book, had the right to a faithful adaptation for no reason, and it's the worst sin in the movie. We can ignore the first and second reasons I just listed, but the assassination attempt of Veidt is ridiculous in the movie. In the book, the assassin shoots and kills Veidt's secretary that is happening to walk with Veidt at the time, wrong place, wrong time, and then goes to shoot Veidt. This allowed Veidt the time to tackle him before being shot. In the film, however, the assassin is apparently targeting Adrian, shoots everyone else in the room, including Adrian's business colleagues and rivals, and the secretary, instead of Adrian, allowing him to tackle the assassin. I don't know anyone, especially Rorschach, would have taken that as evidence that there's a killer hunting mass, when the killer did everything but shoot the former hero in the room. Even stuff like the fight at the end of the movie has changed, which is in disservice, since the graphic novel shows Veidt's ability to outsmart Rorschach and Night Owl, beat them in hand-to-hand combat at the same time, all while doing this while eating dinner. The film has the dull setting in the open room, just taking away the skill the fight in the novel had. But the worst of it all is what they did to Adrian in the movie was actually make him a bad guy. In the novel, Adrian's character was making the ultimate decision, a decision that he full-heartedly believes will kill millions, but will also save billions from nuclear holocaust in the process.
Wait a minute. Next. After what you did, you can't get away with that. All the countries are unified and pacified. Can't get away with it. Will you expose me, undoing the peace millions died for? Kill me, risking subsequent investigation? Morally, you're in checkmate. Like Blake. Let's compromise.
He doesn't consider himself a bad guy in the book, just a man who took the responsibility in stopping the Earth's demise, and took it the only way he knew how. In the book, this was the world's greatest practical joke, a plan that was completely changed in the movie. In both stories, the comedian is the one to shut down the idea of the Crime Busters, which was formed by Ozymandias in both versions as well, with the comedian saying that no matter what they did, the world was going to end up in flames from nuclear war anyways.
Ain't nothing gonna matter once those nukes start flying, we'll all be dust. But Ozymandias here. Be the smartest man on the cinder.
The comedian was right too, and Adrian knew this. That's why he came up with this plan.
He discussed nuclear war's inevitability, described my future role as smartest guy on the cinder, and opened my eyes. Only the best comedians accomplish that. I remember the charred map between my fingers. Nelson saying, "Someone's got to save the world." That's when I understood. That's when it hit me.
The only problem, the comedian stumbled across those plans decades later while they were near completion, and not even Blake could laugh at what he saw. Adrian was forced to kill the comedian in his home so he couldn't spill his guts like he was already doing drunkenly to one of the old villains, Moloch, that all the heroes used to fight. Adrian then kills Moloch and frames Rorschach to get him arrested and off his trail. Everything Adrian does in the book, every murder is for a utopia that he believes will unite the land just as Alexander the Great had done before him, and end the nuclear war. Though these scenes right here are adapted from book to film, Adrian himself isn't, and neither are the scenes that focus on him and his exploits. Adrian is sketching the movie, having a layered dread over his entire performance. Not only that, but I can say with every murder Vite committed or had ordered, he had a reason that could be justified in making his utopia and fulfilling his plan. What exactly is Adrian's plan? What is the world's greatest practical joke? Well, in the book, it's teleporting a giant genetically engineered psychic squid to New York City and having it explode on arrival, causing a psychic blast that would kill 3 million people, all in efforts to make it look like an alien psychic blast.
The plan Blake had uncovered was this. To frighten governments into cooperation, I would convince them that Earth faced imminent attack by beings from another world. Teleported to New York, my creature's death would trigger mechanisms within its massive brain, cloned from a human sensitive. The resultant psychic shockwave, killing half the city.
What exactly is Adrian's master plan? What is the world's greatest practical joke? In the graphic novel, it's teleporting a giant genetically engineered psychic squid to New York City and having it explode on arrival, causing a psychic wave blast that kills 3 million people, all in efforts to make it look like an alien invasion on planet Earth, and have the US and Soviets team up to stop it. And it actually works, stopping the war almost instantly after the destruction of New York City. And in the book, Ozymandias also only poisons 3 of his top scientists, not 8, making it feel like Adrian is just upping the body count to do so, like when the assassin killed all the people in the suits before his secretary. The worst change is the plan itself. In the movie, instead of Dr. Manhattan working on a teleportation machine, unknown of its true purpose, he's working on a renewable source of energy created by himself, unknown of its true purpose.
Funding our work with Dr. Manhattan. Now, we recently expanded our research facility in Antarctica in the hope of developing cheap, renewable sources of energy that we might eliminate the world's reliance on fossil fuels.
This has changed, so at the end of the film, Adrian uses the machine to create nukes made from Dr. Manhattan's energy, and detonates them to multiple major cities to frame Dr. Manhattan on an attack on Earth and unite the countries at war. This would be fine if we didn't already know that Adrian could do this plan without framing Dr. Manhattan for Armageddon, and Adrian kills about 15 million people in this movie and attacks multiple cities, when we know that attacking just New York City and killing 3 million people will do the trick and end the war.
A few key regions around the globe: New York, Los Angeles, Moscow, Hong Kong, disintegrated in an instant. 15 million people killed by Dr. Manhattan himself. The world's punishment for flirting with World War III.
The rest just seems like overkill. When Adrian keeps the body count rising, and exponentially I might add, by the millions, it seems like he might straight up be an evil mastermind instead of a man making the hardest choice that no one wants to make. This also again feels like Snyder spoon-feeding the audience because we're not smart enough to handle the original source material. I can believe that the studio said no to the awesome psychic squid plot point, even though it's fucking awesome, and said that a normal film audience needs something more normal. But I can also believe that Snyder just went along with it, not fighting the studio and keeping the original ending. The worst part of Adrian is how cocky he is. I believe that Adrian is confident, not arrogant, and even when he is able to notice it and point it out. In the book, Laurie asks how he would have avoided the bullet if the assassin were to shoot him first and not the secretary, and Adrian replies,
Adrian, your assassination attempt. What if he'd shot you first instead of your secretary? I suppose I'd have had to catch the bullet, wouldn't I? You... Come on. That's completely... You couldn't really do that.
Notice that it's still a theory, something that he would have to test. While in the film, he has no doubt that he can catch a moving bullet, which is very conceited of him. This again happens when he talks to Dan at the end of the film. Adrian has no seated doubt that what he did was the wrong thing. He not only believes, but he knows he saved humanity from inevitable doom.
Dan, a world united and at peace, there had to be sacrifice.
In the graphic novel, once all is said and done and Rorschach is dead and the story is about to close, the last thing we get is from Adrian and Dr. Manhattan as a conversation together. Adrian asks a very important thing to Dr. Manhattan.
Did the right thing, didn't I? It all worked out in the end. In the end? Nothing ends, Adrian. Nothing ever ends. John? Wait! What do you mean by...
This is Adrian unsure of himself, and unsure of all the human sacrifices came to execute his plan, and he needs assurance that it was for the right reasons and results, and he even has to ask this from the figure that is basically God. Of course, as an audience, we're not supposed to be able to answer that question of what Adrian did was the right thing. It's not supposed to be a clear answer, and so Dr. Manhattan responds.
In the end? Nothing ends, Adrian. Nothing ever ends. John? Wait! What do you mean by...
It's poignant, and it's a beautiful end for both characters. The film, however, decides to shit on this, having Adrian's last scene with Dan instead. Dan beats on Veidt and tells Veidt that what he did was wrong, leaving no moral decisions for the audience to make.
No! You haven't idealized mankind, but you've deformed it. You've mutilated it. That's your legacy.
Having Adrian's story end with Dan in the movie also ruins Dr. Manhattan's ending. Throughout the story, Dr. Manhattan is called a god. And even at one point he says to Laurie, if there is a god, I'm not him. By the end of the story, Dr. Manhattan only refers to his real name, John Osterman, in third person. Like the two aren't even the same identity, and that's the point because they're not.
It didn't kill Osterman. Did you really think it would kill me?
Dr. Manhattan doesn't view himself as a mere man anymore, and he sees himself as a god among men, and this is clear when Adrian tries to kill him.
But you, Adrian, you're just a man. The world's smartest man poses no more threat to me than does its smartest termite.
During Dr. Manhattan and Adrian's ending in the book, Dr. Manhattan tells Adrian during their last conversation that he will try and create new life, fully taking the role of what we believe a god is.
But you'd regained interest in human life. Yes, I have. I think perhaps I'll create some. Goodbye, Adrian.
Snyder destroys his ending of two amazing characters, all for a kiss and some punches. The entire ending of the movie is changed from the book, and at every change, only Rorschach's death can be justified. Now I'm going to go on a little bit of a quick rant here on a small change that I forgot to mention, and this is something I noticed, which was, why the fuck does Adrian have Babastis? Because inside the book, Babastis is a early, is an early manufacturer of Adrian trying to genetically create the weapon that will destroy New York and save the world. So Babastis is a very early, attempt at genetically modifying creatures. They mention this in the beginning of the movie for, Adrian. They mention that Babastis is a genetically altered thing that they created.
Turning your superhero alter ego, Ozymandias, into a billion-dollar industry. Toys, lunchboxes, genetic engineering.
But why? Why were they focused on genetically creating stuff for the research? Well, they only should have been focused on making Dr. Manhattan's energy, which is the machine that Dr. Manhattan is making, and the teleportation. They say that they focus teleportation and genetically manufacturing a creature in the book, and in this movie it's teleportation and Dr. Manhattan's energy. So I don't understand why genetic research is part of the movie, or why Babastis is even there, other than the fact that Snyder needed to keep Babastis because it's Adrian's animal, but also was changing the story and couldn't justify. Just has it in there. Just has it in there. There's no reason for it. That's the they can't even wrap a brain around it. Just randomly throwing a line about genetic research, and that's it. At the end of the 3-hour and 45-minute road, Watchmen 2009 is definitely a movie that should be seen by source material lovers and movie fans alike. Some poor critic reviews aren't worth skipping this film. especially because the slower burning story and the stylized nature of Snyder's work isn't for everyone, or sometimes anyone. No matter the changes to the story, the film itself is appropriate adaptation when it chooses to be, and it is an amazing story, especially to film audiences. I've always waited so long to read the book so I wouldn't stop enjoying the movie, and I'm glad nothing changed. I do wish that Adrian and his plan would have stayed as it was in the source material, but I'll take the good and the bad when it comes to an adaptation as good as this one. These bad changes I've talked about are stuff that audience members like my dad, who have read the book and seen the movie, don't think the changes hurt the story at all. So if you've been avoiding the movie like I avoided the book, just get to watching it. The film is worth the watch, and the book is a must-read. Who watches The Watchmen? Hopefully more people. Thanks everybody for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was just me trying my first time doing a YouTube video and trying my editing software. If you like these type of videos, go check out Film Rook. He's my twin. He has about 5 videos on like this, on stuff like the Scream TV series, Cobra Kai, Chronicle. So if you want to watch that type of stuff, you want to watch some more reviews, go check out his channel. Okay, have a good day.